Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go up to all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything, and you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on, it's gonna be fun.
All right, guys, today's date, August 2nd, 2023, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan on How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we get started, guys, we are a news podcast, which means that we do try to get the most reputable, citable, award-winning journalism sites that we can go to bring the news to you for your own informational benefit. At the same time, we do kind of stay away from the sensationalization, basically the trash websites. Let's call them what they are. Fox News, News Media, The Blaze. You know them, you love them. Unfortunately, they're all in Tennessee. But that being said, guys, we do always want to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, for a lot of things, guys, and I say for a lot of things, I did not have this. Well, I might have had this on my bingo card for 2023. It gets weird sometimes because we've already had a lot of stuff happen. We are already past the halfway point of the year in 2023. And if this alone does not make you think that something may actually change when it comes to Dorito, nothing will.
Jeopardy became much more serious late today after the former president was indicted for a third time, this time by a federal grand jury in Washington, investigating his alleged attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. In the new indictment, Mr. Trump is charged with 3 counts of conspiracy and 1 count of obstruction. He was summoned to appear on Thursday before a federal magistrate judge in Washington. The indictment also mentions 6 unnamed and unindicted co-conspirators. It says Mr. Trump and the co-conspirators used knowingly false claims of election fraud to get state legislators and election officials to subvert the legitimate election results. Just moments ago, special counsel Jack Smith called the January 6th attack on the Capitol an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy, an attack, he said, that was fueled by lies. Late today, the Trump campaign again called it a witch hunt and interference in the current presidential election, in which Mr. Trump is the Republican frontrunner by a wide margin. We have it all covered tonight, starting with senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett.
Tonight, former President Donald Trump facing a blistering new indictment from special counsel Jack Smith, this time for his actions leading up to the Capitol riot on January 6th. Including, prosecutors say, trying to steal the election from the winner, President Biden. The indictment alleging Mr. Trump was determined to remain in power and spread lies about winning the 2020 election, saying these claims were false and the defendant knew they were false. The former president faces 4 counts, including conspiracy to defraud the United States and conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Prosecutors described an alleged criminal scheme that Mr. Trump launched after Election Day in an indictment that also details 6 unnamed co-conspirators. Prosecutors did not charge Mr. Trump with inciting the January 6th riot. The special counsel speaking out late tonight.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government.
Tonight's indictment against the Republican frontrunner, the second one from special counsel Jack Smith, just last week adding new counts in that classified documents case, accusing Mr. Trump of trying to delete surveillance video subpoenaed by DOJ. Prosecutors say co-defendant Carlos de Oliveira told another Mar-a-Lago employee the boss wanted it erased. The former president posting, Mar-a-Lago tapes were not deleted. They were voluntarily handed over. I never told anybody to delete them. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty in that case, slated to go to trial next May in the heat of the Republican primary. And then there's his trial set for March. Manhattan's DA indicted Mr. Trump for falsifying business records, the former president pleading not guilty there, too. And in Fulton County, Georgia, where barricades are up, the DA says she'll announce this month if Mr. Trump will face charges for trying to overturn the election results in that state.
We're ready to go.
Former President Trump has been summoned to appear in a Washington, D.C. courtroom this Thursday.
Right, Laura, thank you. Immediate reaction tonight from the former president. Garrett Hake is following that part of the story. Garrett.
Okay, so let's just stop it right there because it really goes into other stuff. But yes, Dorito, former failure in chief. Already, and again, I have to keep pointing this out. That is one of 6 things he's fighting. And now you already are fighting the DOJ on withholding documents that you thought you could have because you thought as president you could wave a hand and declassify things. That's not how the way it works. Not only did you refuse, got caught trying to destroy evidence, your own staff testified against you. Now you have to worry about the fact that you just may have single-handedly did election tampering, which is a felony. And that's not even counting the issues that he's having in Manhattan over his legal properties, which that also might be indicted. And the man just cannot. I'm laughing because, number one, whoever is his lawyers, they're having a field day because lawyers' billable hours are no joke. Whoever is Trump's lawyers, I'm at this point certain they can put their kids through college. But the point I'm getting out of all this, guys, is just that for simple fact of the matter. If I don't see him getting out of this. I know we said it a lot of times that, this will be what brings down Trump. This will be what brings down Trump. Keep in mind, Trump's already lost one case of sexual defamation. And unfortunately, it was a civil case because it was actually a federal case. It would prevent him from actually running as a candidate in next year's presidential election. But when you have fraud, when you have withholding classified documents that you were not supposed to have, and on top of that you may have tried to overthrow an election, those all 3 are federal charges. And anybody knows you don't walk away whole from a federal court case. But alas, people have to wonder. For a guy that swears he has money, who's paying his legal defense fund? All those people wearing MAGA hats.
Developments tonight on former President Trump's mounting legal trouble. Sources tell ABC News his team is paying legal fees with cash from political donations totaling $40 million. One super PAC has already shelled out that money in the first half of this year to defend the former president and others. But Trump remains defiant on the campaign trail, blasting the charges against him and denying any wrongdoing. But his rivals are pouncing. The campaign for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the president has spent his money on legal fees and attacking his fellow Republicans and not on defeating Joe Biden. Trump is also threatening to stop supporting Ukraine if he's elected. ABC's Mary Alice Parks leads us off tonight from Washington.
On the campaign trail, Donald Trump tonight on offense, even with another possible indictment hanging over his head. And as ABC learns, his team is paying his legal fees with cash from political donations. A super PAC that supports the former president spending more than $40 million on legal costs in the first half of 2023 to defend Trump, his advisors, and others, sources tell ABC News. Much of that money coming from small dollar donors. Trump's primary rivals taking aim.
He's making regular Americans pay his legal fees.
Republicans that have voted for Donald Trump twice recognize that this baggage is hurting him, is going to hurt him in November.
Even Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, whose campaign in a new statement accused Trump of spending millions to pay his legal fees and go after other Republicans, but, quote, not a cent on defeating Joe Biden. Instead of shying away from new accusations brought this week by the special counsel that he tried to cover up an alleged mishandling of classified documents and directed 2 staff members to destroy evidence, Trump is now centering his campaign around his legal woes.
These are ridiculous indictments, and all they're doing is hoping for massive election interference.
Trump has denied any wrongdoing and is also making clear that if elected, he would stop supporting Ukraine.
The U.S. Congress should refuse to authorize a single additional payment of our depleted stockpiles.
Mary Alice Parks joins us now from Washington. Mary Alice, do we have any idea when the possible January 6th indictment could come down?
Lindsay, it could be any day now. It's been 2 weeks since Trump received that target letter from the special counsel's office.
Okay, so I just wanted to point that out because this was a little bit before the announcement of the indictment. But yes, for a lot of people wondering how is Trump able to pay his legal bills to keep his army of lawyers constantly working for his failed defense? That's right. The same people who, wear MAGA hats and shirts and T-shirts and all the above. Their money is what basically goes to Trump for him to use to pay his legal fund. He is building a legal wall. He's building his legal wall of defense, and his idiots are paying for it. But what more needs to be said at this point about Trump? What? The man is a con man. Failed president, but unfortunately, a lot of people voted him there. And if nothing is done about him before the next presidential election, those same people could turn around and vote him right back in. He is still very much a threat to the Republican nomination. But it's funny that they did mention a few stories back about those 6 people. Well, here's one of them, where Michigan prosecutors were basically going after Matthew DiPernino, who was running for Michigan Attorney General last year, failed to get elected, but was charged with undue possession of a voting machine and conspiracy to overthrow the election. Now, keep in mind, we just talked about a few weeks ago that Republicans were trying to submit a bill to boost election security, always showing the fact that they want the elections to be fair and balanced. If you ever noticed, a lot of the fraud cases that come out always seem to be on the Republican side. It's like a Republican getting caught with an LGBTQ plus member from the party of family values. It's really hypocritical how that works. And at the same time, more is going to come out because the crazy thing about this, guys, that those 6 may possibly see jail time. But, Trump always I always believe in hiring the smartest people. I'm smart. I know smart people. I'm hiring the best people, the smartest people. He said that. And yet, most of the time, they're either fired, resigned, or in jail, or all the above. We're not surprised anymore. But we shall see what happens because, they always say it comes in threes. He's already been indicted. Well, I actually say will be indicted for the Mar-a-Lago seizures. It wasn't a raid. No matter how they say that, it wasn't a raid. So classified documents, you lied on your taxes, falsifying your properties in New York. And the coup de grace is that you may actually go down for overthrowing an election. You actually may go down on all 3 counts. So if there's anything Donald Trump's the first in, it's the first that we actually might see a former president go to jail. That would be interesting. But speaking of interesting, guys, I want to point this out because I highly implore people when it comes to the political world, especially during elections, and people when they see elections, I don't want you to get dismayed. I don't want you to get bored. I want you to get involved. But it's stuff like this that makes me wonder, should we redo elections? Now, what I'm talking about here, guys, I am talking about the rules for the next Republican presidential primary. Now, again, for all those that don't know, there is a certain criteria you must meet in order to actually be on certain national polls in order to qualify for the primary. Now, for Republican candidates to make the next debate, which will be September 27th at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Semi Valley, California, Republican presidential candidates need at least 3% in 2 national polls, or in 1 national poll, or 2 polls from separate early voting states, such as Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. Qualifying polls must be conducted on or after August 1st to meet several requirements, including that they've surveyed at least 800 registered likely Republican voters and are not conducted by a company affiliated with the candidate. Candidate must also have a minimum of 50,000 unique donors, with at least 200 donors in 20 states or territories. What the frack? Now, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. That's the rules for the primary. I'm sure the Democratic rules are somewhere relatively the same. But this is where people get annoyed. Because if you look at what I just said, qualifying, you must qualify on polls, which every news station makes a big deal about the polls. They always do. But the other part, where you have to survey, which again, surveying, no issue with. Surveying means that those candidates have to go to their constituents and be able to get their vote of confidence. Happens at the state and local levels as well as the federal levels. No problem with that. Here's the problem I have with it. The last part. Candidates must have a minimum of 50,000 unique donors with at least 200 donors in 20 states and or territories. Why? Because apparently, whenever it's election season, it's money season. Money gets thrown around, whether for advertisements, whether for TV, radio spots, media spots, staffing, things of that nature. Money gets thrown around, and the more money you throw at something, the more you're trying to influence an area. I freaking hate that. Because, well, it all goes back to Citizens United. It really and truly does. Now, for all those that know, Citizens United basically allows donors to go anonymous. And because of that, that amount of money flows into these elections. And it's a lot of money from people with deep pockets who want certain things from a candidate they push. Happens on the left as well as the right. It is annoying. It is frustrating because the simple fact of the matter is it goes to influence some people's opinions that their votes don't matter because they don't have a big enough paycheck as much as the other guys do. And I freaking hate that because it's hard to argue that. It's hard to argue why your vote matters if the person that depended on your vote to get them elected is going to get influenced by the person who makes a donation. This is why I keep saying and I keep hoping that the next progressive candidates go after Citizens United because, the Supreme Court has struck down Roe versus Wade. They've semi-gutted affirmative action for colleges. I say semi-gutted because affirmative action is still there. They semi-gutted affirmative action for colleges. But again, of all the things they could shoot down or put down, Citizens United is right there to go ahead and take care of a problem. But at the same time, guys, it's election rules like that turn people off. Because here's my thing. I want elections to where candidates' feet are held to the fire. They can't dance around anything. You have to hold them to an answer. You have to hold them at their accountability, despite how they feel about it. Because they're already going to be in the hot seat as politicians. They should be able to withstand the same type of scrutiny from the same people they're asking for them to put their trust in them and get them into an elected office. I don't see why not. The Newsroom, again, a great television show if you haven't seen it, did a wonderful way of how they should be doing debates. I wish, and I can't play it because if I did, HBO would probably stop the stream because we're live. But if you ever get a chance, the Newsroom does a brilliant example of how the debate should go. And I think if we actually adopted that, I'm gonna try to squeeze in here one day. Trust me, I'll figure that out. But to actually hold candidates' feet to the fire and to really show their actions that got them here would shine a different light on these candidates. At the same time, bring more people into it because now we're not hiding behind pleasantries. We're not hiding behind double speak. We're actually getting the answers from these candidates that we want. I would love that. But again, we're stuck with these rules where apparently money talks. And let's be honest, money is going to be poured in from both sides. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, or independent, you're going to see a whole lot of money fly in between between now until the end of next year. And we really shouldn't be surprised about that. But speaking of surprises, Trump 2.0, otherwise known as dictator Ron DeSantis, making the rounds as he is a Republican presidential candidate who has a plan for America because he believed what works in Florida should work for the rest of the world. And this is how he described it.
I'm running for president because we need to reverse the decline of this country and restore our country to the greatness that it deserves. And that begins by restoring an American economy that actually works for American families again. And the reality is, if you've seen over these many years, American families have been saddled with weak economic growth, high prices, the quality of life has stagnated. Yet we've seen our national debt explode, and the Chinese Communist Party continues to eat this country's lunch every single day. We cannot have policy that kowtows to the largest corporations in Wall Street at the expense of small businesses and average Americans. There's a difference between a free market economy, which we want, and corporatism, in which the rules are jiggered to be able to help incumbent companies. We will reshore, we will diversify, and we will expand our economy. We will reward hard work and ingenuity. We will usher in a new era of growth, prosperity, and civic pride. We are a nation with an economy, not the other way around. We are citizens of a republic. We are not cogs in a global economic empire. We reject the technocratic management of American decline. We reject fostering dependency on welfare programs. We will reverse the decline of this country. We will restore our country to the greatness that it deserves. We want to be a country that makes things again. We want to be a country where where you can raise a family on one sole income. We want to be a family where we're both inspiring but also demanding loyalty from our elites. We want to be a country where young people feel they can develop skills and values to be able to build productive and fulfilling lives. So we will declare our economic independence from the failed elites that have orchestrated American decline, from the reckless federal spending that has inflated prices and plunged this nation to the brink of bankruptcy. We will declare our economic independence from the Chinese Communist Party. We will declare our economic independence from the central planners who seek to advance their political agenda at the expense of the well-being of average Americans. We will seek economic independence from destructive policies like the Green New Deal that seek to kneecap our domestic energy production. We will seek independence from a class of progressive corporations looking out for every interest under the sun except the interests of the American people.
Yeah, sounds like Republicans' greatest hits. It's funny. You realize he didn't say anything, right? Because the first thing they always try to do, we want to declare economic independence. We're already economically independent. But unfortunately, because of decisions made by previous Republican administrations, a lot of our industries have moved overseas. That's what he's not saying, guys. But the simple fact of the matter is, he said he wants to change the U.S. relationship with China. How many times have we sit here and heard that and cringed? Because what he wants to do, DeSantis proposes, if he's president, he wants to sign a bill that limits Chinese influence in Florida, basically more for the U.S., because the bill that he has in Florida basically puts a tariff on Chinese imports, which means that what happens is, and of course, you've seen what Trump got to do when Trump called himself a tariff man and didn't realize what tariffs actually do, by putting tariffs on things that actually raise prices and actually depleted inventories. Because the simple fact of the matter, it was hard to get almost anything because Trump's tariff man, as he called himself. But the problem is, China's imports are over 80% of what's in the U.S. right now. Anytime you see, like, case in point, almost everything you'll find is made in China. China's greatest economy is basically their goods that they sell back to the U.S. and we consume them. A lot of those imports that we consume or purchase used to be made here, but because of cheap labor and greater resources overseas, companies have moved overseas or outsourced their things overseas to be built. And now Ron DeSantis, if he's president, wants to turn around and limit the relationship with China. Yeah, not a good idea. Then he talks about getting America's workforce. Now, keep in mind, when you hear that from a Republican, we want to incentivize investment and mandate work requirements. You know what you just heard out of that point? That means that anybody that is on any type of government assistance, your work requirements will increase. For example, there was a big fluff not too long ago. I would say almost a year or 2 years ago, when the work requirements were that they wanted to put work requirements on those on Medicaid. You had senior citizens who were given work requirements in order to keep their Medicaid or Medicare benefits. Senior citizens. It's one thing to sit there and put them on well-bodied Americans, say, oh, and you need to look for work, or you need to take a job, or you need to do this in order to keep your food stamps, or your WIC, or your government subsidiaries or government assistance. And even then, that's wrong, because they did take it one step further, because the folks that were working to get food stamps, you had those folks that couldn't get food stamps or just was under the impression that people on food stamps was just eating shrimp, steak, and caviar while people were struggling. And again, that's what conservatives do. A lot of conservatives out there have learned if they make poor people mad at minorities, instead of being mad at the rich folks that screw them over, they can damn near get away with murder, because a lot of those red states have implications on what you can spend with food stamps or cash assistance now. And it's stupid, and it's designed for people not to use them, to deter them, really. And in this case, Ron DeSantis said, oh, well, if it works in Florida, it could work for the U.S. He wants to basically lower individual tax rates. Now, I know for a lot of people that sounds great, but keep in mind, Trump did this in his 2007 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which only benefited corporations and rich people. It actually increased taxes on individuals and middle-income families. He wants to expand that. Now, the simple fact of the matter is, he talks about Americans and their energy independence. We're so dependent on all these things. Keep in mind, he described nothing. But in his plan, he wants to reduce regulations. He wants to hamstring the EPA, who actually did increase regulations on carbon emissions, on air pollution, things of that nature that a lot of industries didn't like. DeSantis wants to cut the red tape. Ironically enough, the same thing that Trump did when he was in office. And then my personal favorite, he wants to reform the U.S. educational system. We'll get to that in a moment, because, again, that's going back to the story we talked about where he approved a educational reform plan in Florida that said slavery may have had on-the-job benefits to slaves. Yes, I cannot make this up, and we'll get to that momentarily. But he wants to, so again, his whole war on woke politics. If Ron DeSantis is not Ben Shapiro, if he ever ran for office, he swears up and down anything that's against him is woke ideology. But he wants to turn around and expand his Don't Say Gay bill, not only to schools, but to universities as well. He wants to ban things. He wants to ban whatever is for minorities or LGBTQ+, if he has it his way. And also, before we get, and again, guys, this is just his plan. Now, keep in mind, this is the plan that he puts out for the world to see. You can go on his website, or you can go to Politico or anywhere you want to see his plan. When I tell you, looking at his plan, I try to say this so many times. DeSantis is Trump 2.0. He might be bolder. He might be a little bit smarter, but he's basically doing the greatest hits version. And again, we should all be worried, especially at the fact of the matter when you hear his answer, when he thought it was a good idea to rewrite slavery, to make it seem like it was a DeVry degree, and he doubled down.
The president shares the stage with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in Iowa for the first time tonight, all as DeSantis is pushing back against criticism of a new curriculum on slavery. He just spoke to Gabe Gutierrez.
Tonight, Governor Ron DeSantis in Iowa under fire.
There's no silver lining in freedom in slavery.
His GOP rival Tim Scott, the only black Republican senator, slamming the state of Florida for adopting new public school standards that teach how slaves develop skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. It's a line of attack first launched by Vice President Harris.
They want to replace history with lies.
Another black Republican member of Congress, Florida's Byron Donalds, who endorsed former President Trump, has also criticized that portion of the new standards. But DeSantis argues that line has been taken out of context.
I would also note some of those congressmen are putting out information that's totally false. You got to be willing to stand up and fight back against false narratives. And that's what we do in Florida every day.
One of the scholars who helped develop the Florida standards is also defending them.
This curriculum is devoted to telling the truth, whereas Kamala Harris has retailed a lie.
After laying off more than a third of its staff, the DeSantis campaign is trying to reset, holding more up-close events with voters and their families.
Oh, what is that? An icy? Yeah, that's probably a lot of sugar, huh?
While Mr. Trump is still dominating the field.
If we make it about the vision for the future, we're going to win. Obviously, with me as the nominee, we're going to focus on Biden's failures and our vision for the future. That's what the election will be about. If Donald Trump is the nominee, it's going to be about all those other issues.
With all due respect, Governor, you're down by 30 points, though.
Well, no, I mean, that says you. I mean, I can tell you, we've been in Iowa. I'm the one showing up at all these places. We're signing up people day after day.
Here in Iowa, tonight's Lincoln dinner will feature 13 GOP presidential hopefuls, all except Chris Christie.
I'm sorry. Oh, you ever see somebody? Look, I got to be honest. You ever see somebody when you sit there and tell them the truth, when you sit there and tell them reality? Wow. Did you not see the look on his face? Oh, well, you know what? As the presidential candidate, I believe that I am the person that's going to be able to beat Joe Biden. But with all due respect, Governor, you're down 30 points behind Trump. Well, that's your opinion. That's your opinion. Dude got hit with the truth. He's like, did you have to bring up the 30 points? I mean, did you have to? But no, it is amazing to me that in this case, that he doubled down on, of course, keep in mind, this is after he cut his campaign staff down. After they heavily changed direction. And now it's just like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. How do we beat a guy who is facing multiple indictments, possible jail time, and he's still beating me? You just can't make this up. But you know what else you can't make up, though? This individual here, that man right there, William Allen. Now, this man who looks like he is really needing to take a nap right now, he is one of the guys that were the architects behind the curriculum that they're pushing forward, that he is saying that, the facts are the facts and that Madam Vice President doesn't know what she's talking about. So I decided I wanted to know really more about William Allen. And I had to ask this question. I'm like, well, what about William Allen? I mean, is he a professor of African American studies? Is he a historian? Is he an educator? Has he have a background in this? I mean, I'm looking for something, because if you're going to sit there and say that slavery had on the job applications that slaves could use for their own benefit, I would assume the person who's saying that is either a well-educated historian or a professor of African American studies or something in that field that I can sit there and say, you know what? I can't argue with it if he's done his research. But in the next 5 minutes, guys, there was a radio conversation that is currently on NPR right now that I'm going to play. Because for all those that don't know, William Allen, the guy I just showed, he's a professor of political science at Michigan State University. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Even if that is at all controversial, the facts.
We'll talk about the Florida standards without seeing the Florida standards. It's a 216-page document. I've got it open on my screen here, including the sentence that has drawn so much attention from Vice President Harris and others, the one about slaves learning skills. The people who put together the Florida standards include William Allen, who is a professor emeritus of political science at Michigan State University. And he is on the line. Welcome to the program, sir.
Good morning to you.
Let's drill down in a specific sentence that's gotten all the attention. It says, quote, instruction includes how slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. What did you mean by that?
I think the sentence explains itself. Its grammar is certainly perfectly clear. One refers to the fact that those who were held in slavery possess skills, whether they develop them before being held in slavery, while being held in slavery, or subsequently to being held in slavery, from which they benefited when they applied themselves in the exertion of those skills. That's not a statement that is at all controversial. The facts sustain it. The testimonies of the people who lived the history sustain it.
I think you're correct. You could even look at the movie 12 Years a Slave, which is a true story of a man who was enslaved who knew how to play the fiddle. People had different skills and used them in different ways, and sometimes were able to make money for themselves while enslaved. That seems to be factually true. But the allegation here is that you were trying to make slavery seem nice, like a job training program. Did you intend to say that?
The allegation is unrelated to the reality. And let me emphasize that I'm not the author, and no one in the work group is the author. This was a collaborative process, a deliberative process, and the result is a consensual agreement. Therefore, I do not speak to the intentions of the work group, and I don't substitute my intentions for the work group.
Well, if you just look at that language, do you see anything that says that slavery is nice?
When I look at that language, I see what Booker T. Washington meant when he entitled his autobiography Up from Slavery rather than Down in Slavery. I see what Frederick Douglass meant when he described his slave mistress teaching him to read only at the beginning because his owner put a stop to it. But that small glimmer of light was enough to inspire him to turn it into a burning flame of illumination from which he benefited and his country benefited.
You're again telling a true story that Frederick Douglass told himself of how he taught himself how to read. I think you're saying that you see inspiration in that sentence rather than something awful.
I think Douglass saw inspiration in it. I think those who followed him saw inspiration in it. And more decisively, I think Douglass and Ida B. Wells in 1893 gave explicit testimony to that inspiration when they were protesting the exclusion of Africans from the Columbian Exposition. And in the midst of thousands of lynchings, and they celebrated the accomplishments of those post-slavery who had demonstrated their capacities and their skills. But most importantly, they hailed those accomplishments not only as the accomplishments of Black Americans, but the accomplishments of American principles. And these are constantly repeated themes. I won't elaborate all the examples of them any more than I will speak to Eatonville and its Black Seminole and traditions, which are all reported in these standards as appropriate to be taught to school children.
I want to note the context, which maybe is why so many people have felt uncomfortable here. They know that Ron DeSantis is the governor of Florida, that he has pushed very hard on culture war issues, and also he's pushed into the universities. He also signed something called the Stop Woke Act, and one of the things it is said to do is prohibit teachings that might make students feel, quote, guilt or discomfort for historic wrongs. Knowing the context in which your work was going to be seen and also used, I mean, teachers under that law are going to interpret these standards and decide what to teach. Were you entirely comfortable working for the state of Florida?
I didn't work for the state of Florida.
Go on.
This is a volunteer effort. I was not compensated for it. I responded to a general call for people with interest in and commitment to the educational institutions of the state to respond, and I responded, and I participated willingly. It was an offer, a contribution of voluntary public service. The context was, what should school children be asked to learn when a standalone strand of curriculum standards is for the first time initiated in the state of Florida? That's the context. That's where we worked. And I'm certainly perfectly content that I had the opportunity to contribute to that.
And I'll just mention, since you said that Eatonville is in the standards, I've done a search here, and the word Eatonville is in fact mentioned 6 times in the standards.
As well as the name Zora Neale Hurston.
Zora Neale Hurston. We just got about 10 or 15 seconds left here. Bottom line, do you think that teachers following these standards will give an accurate representation of American history to students?
I think teachers are intelligent, and I know because I've worked with a few outstanding teachers in a mentoring relationship in Florida, and they understand that the standards give them the opportunity to teach. They do not dictate to them what to say.
Okay. William Allen is a member of the...
Ooh, I'm sorry, but that was a load of bullshit. Yes, William Allen, for the last 5 minutes, I wanted him to, he is really going to sit here. I was like, the guy, and again, I got to point this out, and I point this out very heavily, that he is not. Oh, hey, what's up? I appreciate it, man. First off, William Allen is not a historian. He is not a professor of African American studies. He is a professor of political science. And the book, as he mentioned, wasn't his, and therefore doesn't want to take credit for it, but use it as the basis to try to transform Florida's K-12 educational system by trying to sit there and say, he's trying to invoke Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells, trying to say that their previous time as slaves led them to be the people who they are now. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. And the fact that a black person is signing on to this gives a guy like DeSantis sit there and go, huh? Well, if they sign on to it, it can't be that bad, right? Because they don't want to sit there and say that he did it. But to sit there and say, and this is why I say the hypocrisy of it all. The hypocrisy is they wanted to put in and say, you can't talk about same-sex relationships, marriages, or things of that nature in K-12. But we decided that we're going to revamp African-American history and say, hey, slaves benefited from being slaves. It is downright amazing, appalling, and insulting. And if I was a teacher, which again, I have nothing but respect for educators out there, but teachers in Florida are going to have a very hard time trying to find a way to actually educate children, because education is what actually will drive the nation. Our education is in the toilet. It really is. Education hasn't been revamped for quite a while. College tuition goes up every year, but you get the same education in colleges and universities. Education as a whole needs to get the same type of blank check that the U.S. government gives the Pentagon, Army, and the Department of Defense. That being said, this is the one time where parents and congressmen need to come forward and say, this isn't right. The fact that we're going to be teaching that slavery had benefits is wrong. At the same time, you're trying to rewrite history because for some odd reason, America is so proud of its history, except for the dark spots. You know, the dark times in history, because they'll acknowledge that they put Chinese and Japanese Americans in internment camps. They'll acknowledge that, during the Civil War, they did some things that were unspeakable. They'll acknowledge what they've done to Native Americans in the Trail of Tears. But you won't acknowledge the fact that for 400 years, you took a race and treated them as cattle. But you'll say they had benefits. Right. And you're gonna get a guy who is a professor of political science, not a historian, never taught a class on history, never done any research on African American studies, but takes a book but doesn't give the author, takes literature but doesn't take credit for it, but wants to use that as a basis to teach the next generation. You just can't make this type of stuff up. You really can't. But speaking of things you can't make up, guys, I'm trying to figure out this thing here. You guys remember when Trump turned around and said, we're going to create a space force, and everybody laughed? Yeah. Why is it still around? Biden is wanting to keep U.S. Space Command in Colorado because initially it was going to move to Alabama. This could have been a dig at Senator Tommy Tuberville. But for me, I'm wondering, U.S. Space Command, why do we still have it? Because, and I used to say that, I really did, But now that the whole thing about UFOs are possibly real, and that the existence of aliens may be real, and the fact of the matter is just that, again, I'm asking, why do we need a Space Force? To me, if we're going to do a federally funded government expedition into the unknown, we already had it. It's called NASA. Just fund them. Simple and plain. But I digress. I just of all the things, Space Force. I thought we got rid of that the moment we got rid of Dorito, but apparently it's still around. Who knew? But speaking of business, transitioning a little bit, guys, to businesses, because I have been saying this, that the job force, the job market in the U.S. is just really going downhill, and that these companies that were given boatloads of cash are slowly closing doors. One of them being the biggest trucking company, Yellow Trucking, has declared bankruptcy and is laying off 30,000 of its employees.
Collapse of Yellow, one of the country's biggest trucking companies, affecting 30,000 workers and leaving taxpayers in the hole for hundreds of millions of dollars it received during COVID. Here's Tom Costello.
Those yellow trucks are iconic on America's highways. Now it's the biggest collapse ever in the U.S. trucking industry, with the company telling employees and customers that it's shutting down, affecting 30,000 employees, including 22,000 Teamsters. A mechanic for 20 years, Shannon Abbott is tonight worried about his family.
I'm worried about my insurance for me and my family. You never know, something could happen.
Last month, Yellow's CEO blamed the union.
The leadership at the International Brotherhood of Teamsters refuses to come to the table to discuss the future of our employees.
When managers in Omaha urged drivers to pressure the union,
the company is running out of cash and is at risk of closure and liquidation.
The anger and pushback were immediate.
But we're the ones that do the work for you. You guys can't run this company. That's the problem.
Yellow has been around for 99 years, offering lower rates to truck freight for retailers big and small, including Home Depot and Walmart. But for years, it struggled to turn a profit. Last month, congressional investigators found Yellow should have never received $700 million in emergency funding during the pandemic. The Trump administration approved the loan in 2020, claiming the company was critical to maintaining national security, even though the Justice Department had sued Yellow for overcharging the military. Taxpayers still own 30% of the company. Its stock down 89% in less than 2 years. Tonight, industry experts believe other trucking companies can pick up Yellow's business with minimal impact on the supply chain.
Are there jobs for every worker at Yellow? That remains to be seen, but certainly there is a steady demand for drivers.
The question is whether the national demand for truck drivers will create enough openings for Yellow's drivers now looking for jobs.
So yeah, this is the part, guys, that I'm getting at. That a company that, for the most part, was given a loan during the time of COVID, and people worried about paychecks, companies going to the government and saying, "Hey, we need something to keep our payrolls going, otherwise we're going to let people go." Yellow got $700 million, and yet somehow, and I don't blame the drivers. I really don't blame the drivers at all. But Yellow got $700 million, and that wasn't enough to keep the doors open. That the fact that they closed down, the fact they had to let go of 30,000 employees, and some of those employees have probably worked for Yellow for decades, if not years, if not decades. This is why I keep saying that the state of business and how business is done in America needs to change, because a lot of companies out here still treat it like the 1950s. That this is what happens, and I say this all the time. This is what happens when you get companies who would rather make sure that their profit and their shareholders are taken care of. Their CEOs and their corporations, their CEOs and their corporate people get their bonuses while still screwing the same people who are working to keep the company going. And at the same time, the Teamsters were holding off on doing a strike because they pretty much said, if we don't, this company could fold in on itself. It still did anyway. And 30,000 truck drivers are now scrambling, are now facing life-altering decisions. But I'll bet you one thing. I'll bet the CEO, the former CEO of Yellow Trucking, is fine. And it's just not right. It is not right. And this is why I keep saying all the time, guys, there is no such thing as corporate loyalty. Because it's amazing how many times they sit there and say, well, if you're going to leave, give a 2-week notice. But when they're ready to get rid of you, they tell you that same day. It is amazing how one-sided of care these corporations have toward employees, and at the same time will still sit there and say they make great decisions. Like the guy said in the video, you guys can't run this company because somebody in yellow, specifically the CEO himself, has to answer what happened to that influx of cash that was given to you to keep the company afloat, and yet you still tanked. But I feel for those guys. I really do, because companies across the board are laying off jobs. We talked about Meta, we talked about Facebook, we talked about Microsoft, and now CVS, because they're about to lay off 5,000 employees, mostly corporate, but there may actually be some retail as well. But think about that, 5,000 employees, because companies these days are not adapting. They're not. And I keep saying this all the time. Here's the problem. Here is the absolute problem. They don't want to pay nobody. And that's what it comes down to, because you know what most corporations will say? Most CEOs will always sit there and say, oh, well, this remote work has really hurt us, or nobody wants to work. There are plenty of jobs out there, but nobody wants to work. They use that same old BS. But the truth of it all is, what this pandemic has shown us is that nobody wants to kill themselves for peanuts anymore. That if you want me to work, you're gonna pay me something that I can sustain myself off of. And again, the simple fact of the matter is, guys, is our minimum wage is still $7.29. Minimum wage in 2023 is still $7.29. How has it not gone up? Everything has gone up, but incentive and income for the American worker. And a lot of these American workers right now are learning that, hey, you need us to run. And if you don't have us, well, your doors will be closing. Yellow found out the hard way. And again, who's not to say that, yes, there are other trucking companies out there that can take up the business that Yellow had. But keep in mind, Yellow Trucking gave the cheapest freight out there. So you know what that means? The cost of those other companies picking up that freight from Yellow are going to be passed on to the customer. So you know what you're going to see? You're going to see more increase on prices for things that you need, simply put, because the corporations have to still make their profit margins. And yet they wonder why they're going under. Like I said, they wonder. It's sad, and at the same time, not surprised. But at the end of the day, pay people. It's not that hard. But speaking of things that are not that hard, guys, I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room. Mitch McConnell basically froze. And Dianne Feinstein, the Democratic senator, did not know where she was. I think it's a high time we talk about putting age limits on those that serve in the House and the Senate.
Two incidents with high-profile senators this week have put a new spotlight on the age of our top political leaders, already a contentious issue in the 2024 presidential race. Here's Peter Alexander.
For America's lawmakers, seniority has long meant power and prestige, but now it might also be a political liability. Today, the Senate's longest-serving leader, Republican Mitch McConnell's office, insists he intends to serve out his term, days after the 81-year-old froze mid-sentence. McConnell, a childhood polio survivor, has suffered a series of recent falls, cracking a rib and suffering a concussion.
Gotta watch those sandbags.
But he joked about this week's episode hours later, as Republicans stand by him.
Mitch is strong. He's stubborn as a mule.
He's not the oldest in office. 90-year-old Democrat Dianne Feinstein, who some members of her own party have urged to resign, appeared confused during a committee meeting yesterday, starting to give a speech when she was only supposed to vote on a bill.
Submitted. Yeah, just say aye. Okay.
Feinstein's office later saying the situation was a little chaotic and that the senator was preoccupied. The 118th Congress is the third oldest since 1789. President Biden's age is already a key issue ahead of 2024, stumbling on steps, tripping over a sandbag, adding to the scrutiny. The president's increasingly trying to diffuse any criticism about his age.
Think about it. I know I'm 198 years old.
Already America's oldest president, at the end of a second term, Joe Biden will have just turned 86. The Republican frontrunner Donald Trump would be 82. A recent NBC News poll found more than 2/3 of all voters say they have concerns about the president having the necessary mental and physical health to serve. 55% say the same about former President Trump.
When you look at how much a president ages in just 4 years, and they're already at that age, what's that leave us with?
And Peter, we have some late-breaking news tonight regarding President Biden's family.
Lester, that's right. For the first time tonight, President Biden.
Well, let's just go ahead and get that because it basically knocks on your grandchild. But yes, it's a solid point. Okay, for all those that don't know, there are lifetime. I'm sorry, that's wrong. That there are no term limits on being a U.S. representative or a senator. There is not. You, as long as you're elected, that you simply put can run. You can basically be in office till you die. I don't mean to put it that way, but yes, as long as you're elected, you basically can serve as long as you want. Here's the problem. You get people like that. Mitch McConnell, I don't feel bad about. Let me just be real. Moscow Turtle Mitch, the fact that he had a system reset in the middle of a speech is funny because we expect that. You see that man. That man's already got one foot in the grave as it is. But then you see Dianne Feinstein of the Democratic side, who forgets that all she has to do is vote, but she gives a speech. She has handlers. They're not aides. They are handlers that have to sit there and tell her, just say aye. You heard it. Just say aye. Oh, aye. I'm sorry. When your congressional aides are now your handlers, it is time to call it. And it really is. Because the fact of the matter is, guys, you know what's so interesting? And I got to point this out too. That for the simple fact of the matter, there's no terms. That you realize for the average senator or House representative, they get $174,000 a year for the rest of their lives. Actually, even after serving, they get $174,000 a year. Crazy, right? That you still get that and the benefits long after you left your seated office. At the same time, do we want older generations still serving in Congress? We don't. We don't need it. We really don't need it. Why? For the simple fact of the matter is, as they talked about, do you really want people who can make decisions to affect millions to have, a brain reset or forget where they are or have a endless battle with steps? This is why term limits, I say this all the time, I'm all for term limits. And here's my suggestion. If the powers that be are listening, here's my suggestion for the House and the Senate. Put them in the same boat as the presidency. Simple. You get 2 consecutive terms. You serve just as long as the current administration does, which means once that current administration election is up or their election time is coming around, your election time is coming around. The president can serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. A senator or a representative can serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. Simple. Treat them the same way you treat the executive office. You know what I mean? You know what it means by that? Well, that doesn't prevent folks. If they love somebody, then that same person can come back in a year later. Okay, let's do age limits then. Let's put a cap, because you know what's going to be funny? Because if you put a cap on age, you're going to put a cap on the voters. For example, let's say a favorite senator is 65 years old, and let's say that the age limit on serving in Congress is right at 65. Could that 65-year-old individual still serve in the Senate or Representative where they came from? According to the new law, no. Will that tick off their voters? Yes. And what happens? Those voters either go for a different candidate or they will not vote at all. So there does come to a certain point. Now, I mean, we could put a number up there like, hey, if you're 70 years old, we don't need you serving. At 70 years old, we kind of need you out of the way. That's what it should be. And I would happily put that rule up and say, yes, if you're 70 years old, you cannot serve in Congress. 70 plus. Because, 60, 65, you're not as bad. But 70, yeah, we can't have you nowhere near where decisions can affect millions are in, because we don't need you pulling a Mitch McConnell. We don't need you pulling a Dianne Feinstein and forgetting where you are. Just saying. But speaking of people forgetting where they are, Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito hates the fact that he says that the Democrats and what they are simply doing is pushing a bill through Congress to where the Supreme Court has an ethical board that they have to answer to. The man right there, Justice Alito, the same guy whose dissertation leaked about them overthrowing Roe versus Wade so long ago, is sitting there saying Congress lacks the power to impose ethics codes on the Supreme Court. And here's the thing that always gets me. You are a Supreme Court justice, right? You are supposed to lay down the laws of the land. You are supposed to basically rule, hopefully on the right side of justice. So if Congress decides that, yes, the Supreme Court does need to answer to somebody, you are acting like the child that goes, why do I need to answer to somebody? Who's going to check me, boo? That's what he's basically saying. And it is funny as hell. For what reason? We do need the Supreme Court to get checked. Not when you have two out of your 6 Supreme Court justices who have went on trips by Republican donors, had bills paid by Republican donors, houses, gifts, things of that nature. And, not just talking about Alito, but Clarence Thomas, his wife should have been enemy number one of the fact that she wanted the previous election overthrown. Why not have an ethical board that the Supreme Court has to answer to? Because there needs to be checks and balances. I'm all for it, no matter how Justice Alito doesn't like it, because you would think for a judge, he would all be about checks and balances. But we will follow that bill as it goes through Congress. But an update on the story, guys, that we did cover last week, and I just want to give a refresher about, again, when it comes to law enforcement, you can't help but wonder why they go so hard on minorities. This is a story about the guy who literally got a dog sicked on him, a canine dog sicked on him, even though his superiors told him not to.
Police canine handler who's seen on video unleashing his dog on an unarmed black man has been fired. Circleville police officer Ryan Speakman released the dog as truck driver Jadarius Rose was surrendering to state police with his hands up. The dog appears to bite Rose. Police say Rose had led officers on a chase after refusing to pull over for a traffic stop. During the pursuit, a 911 caller who appears to be Rose tells a dispatcher that he was afraid officers would kill him. Meanwhile, Speakman's union says the officer was terminated without cause and the grievance has been filed. We're back now with our series Take It Off today, showcasing the incredible.
Okay, so again, that was a recap, right? Now, that same officer, because a lot of people are wondering, because in the video, and I thought it would play it, and I apologize. In the video, you hear the guy sit there and say, don't release the dog. Don't release the dog. He's unarmed. He's surrendering. Don't release the dog. The next video is from the canine officer's point of view. I got questions.
Get on the ground or I'm going to send the dog. Here. You're going to get the dog sick. Get on the ground or you're going to get bit. Police canine, you're going to get bit. Police canine, you're going to get bit. Final chance, you're going to get bit. Sir, here. Here. Down. Here, nay, here. Down. On the ground! On the ground! On the ground! Get it out! He didn't comply. I gave him 3 commands. I told him, final warning. If you don't get on the ground, you're going to get the dog. That's why they seem mad at me for it. He wasn't complying. I mean, am I wrong?
Y'all did a dog bite.
What do you mean? I gave you 3 warnings. Did I not?
Man, you just pulled up. I ain't trying to hear that.
Did I not say?
The people who was
Listen to me. Did I not say final warning? You're gonna get by the dog. Yes or no?
It don't matter, bro.
No, you didn't comply, so you got the dog.
So what's crazy about that is that's from the K9 officer's point of view. And like the man said, you just rolled up. He was already hands up, listening to the officer on the scene. You can still hear the officer in the background. Don't send the dog. He's surrendering. And what does he do? He tunes him out. He decides to impose his will and say, either get down or I'm sending the dog. You know what? Even the dog was like, and I'll give the dog credit to a certain extent, because when you let the dog go, the dog didn't immediately go for him. He went to the other officers. He's like, this man's surrendering. What the fuck am I supposed to do? Only for the guy, his owner, to call him back and sick him on there. And for a lot of people to understand that, attack dogs do have a history with black people. At the same time, an attack dog is like a loaded weapon, and it's a dangerous weapon, and it's treated as such. And if you aim a police-trained dog at someone, especially if they're unarmed, yeah, you deserve to get fired. You actually deserve to get sued. And I have a perfect, and I keep saying this all the time, I have a perfect solution to all these times where officers, especially when dealing with minorities, they seem to be a little bit extra. And I'll explain my solution right after this next one, because, again, this is going back to law enforcement, where imagine a mistake by a police officer led to an altercation that didn't even have to happen. And yes, it actually did happen.
Everybody in the car, hands outside the window. Hands outside. Maintain your hands outside. Driver, slowly lift up your shirt only for us to see your waistband. Leave your hands outside the car. We know there is a gun in there. If you reach in that car, you may get shot, so be careful. Do not reach in the car.
Come back here. What happened? Is that your tag on the vehicle? Yeah, I'm from Arkansas, Little Rock. I'm a nurse. I've never done anything in my life.
I've never been attacked in my life.
Hands down.
This is scaring the hell out of me.
Ma'am, I have that anxiety.
Okay. I'm trying.
Relax. Okay. So, are y'all here out of town? Where are you coming?
A tournament. We're in Super 64 National. Look at my baby.
Nothing's gonna happen to him. Nothing's gonna happen to him.
Everything matches up perfect.
That's on me.
We're gonna explain everything.
Yeah, I know.
Get it figured out.
Listen, bro, we just here for a basketball tournament, bro.
We just learned right now. That's why we stopped.
Come on, man, don't do this to my son, bro. Come on, man. I'm a basketball coach, bro.
It's okay.
Look at this, bro. Listen, bro. We are legit. I'm a basketball coach. I got concealed carry and everything, bro.
That's why we told you.
Y'all put a gun on my son for no reason, dog.
So, it looks like I made a mistake. So I ran an AZ for Arizona instead of AR. And that's what happened.
And you know something go away.
I made a mistake.
Just listen, though. It could have went all wrong for us, though.
What do you mean by that?
I'm just saying, though, one day, because like I say, I dropped my phone here. They yelled out, don't move or we'll shoot. Then I dropped my phone. If I would have went to reach for my phone, we could have all got killed. You know, man, it's just there's so much shit going on, man. Hey, man, I'm telling you, man, this is so sorry. Yeah, no one's on.
No, we're not good. I made a mistake. No, that's on me. That's on me.
It's all good.
That's on me.
Appreciate y'all, man. Yeah, sorry you had to go through that, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your cooperation. I'm sorry about that.
It's all love. Hey, God bless y'all too, man.
Good luck, guys.
So let me tell you that crock of shit. Officer in that one, and I'm going to stress that very heavily. The officer who ran the plate ran it incorrectly. Now you would like to think, because I have really no love lost for law enforcement. For all the training, for all the time that you take, you also have an authority behind it. And this officer ran the plate incorrectly, which alerted them because the plate she ran actually came up with a warrant for an extremely dangerous individual. She referred that. The surrounding officers pulled out with guns drawn. And like the man said in the video with his children, the man has a concealed carry. You have multiple cops coming down on you, guns drawn. And we all know the history of traffic stops with minorities in law enforcement. No parent wants to ever go through that situation where your kids could possibly be in danger because of a move that you do will be interpreted as aggressive because officers are basically following the instincts of someone who isn't doing their job. Nobody wants that. And I think the thing as a parent and the kids are now traumatized. And like I said before, with minorities, there's not a minority out there that doesn't have a cop story. And trust me, it wasn't a positive experience. It wasn't. There's not. You would be hard pressed to find somebody. You would be hard pressed to find a minority that actually had some positive experience with a cop at a traffic stop. Because now, like I said, we can go down that list. There's a list a mile long of individuals who complied, who did what the officers wanted them to do, but yet at the same time, those very same officers were allowed to go home, and the people that stopped are no longer with us. At the same time, I cannot, the whole lack of sensitivity by the officers is what annoys me most. It's almost like, I'm sorry, that was my fault. That's on me. I ran it wrong. And this is why I sit there and say so many times, how is it that police law enforcement in America is so bad that a single mistake could have led to loss of life? Does the same thing happen in other countries? That's my question. Because the officer there is sitting there saying, oh, it's my fault. It's my fault. I ran it wrong. But how do you expect individuals who just got stopped, had guns drawn on them, were being threatened with gunfire if they move? Now because I'm assuming it's a she, the officer that ran the plate is sitting there going, no, sorry, my fault. So now guns drawn officer is going to be officer friendly to the very same people he just sat there and said, if you move, we will take it as a hostile action and shoot. I don't blame the girl with the anxiety issues because guess what? Her anxiety hit an all-time high that day. The kids, terrified. The dad, because he's a concealed carry user, now that's just amped up. Now that's just another log on the fire. And now Mr. Officer Gun Friendly has now became Officer Friendly. Oh man, it's okay. It's okay. We just we got told. We just rolled up on the scene. That I'm sorry. The lack of sensitivity. That's what gets me. It's not the fact of that, the officer that ran it wrong didn't do that until the sergeant showed up. The sergeant showed up and told everybody to stand down. It wasn't the fact that, oh, crap, you made a mistake. But, well, I guess we got to go through with it now. This just goes to show you how bad law enforcement is. And the fact that, whenever it comes to law enforcement, I don't feel bad when they're the same ones talking about, oh, I wish the community would help us. No, we've seen what you guys do with the community. And again, I know a lot of people are going to be out there who are still backing the blue and Blue Lives Matter, although we don't really hear from you guys anymore. They'll sit there and say, well, officers can make mistakes. No. That's just, to me, law enforcement is like flying a plane. Law enforcement to me is it's honestly like a pilot. Airline pilots fly multiple flights in a single day. When you go up in the air, you are responsible for the souls that are on that plane. You are solely responsible. Every action, every decision that you make up in that air, you have to account for because you are held responsible. So if a plane crashes, do we blame mechanical failure or do we blame the pilot? Or if the pilot decides, you know what, I'm going to push a little bit more just to make that on time arrival because we're behind. Does a decision lead to turbulence or worse? In the same sense with the officer. The officers, when they pull you over, should actually take the time to make sure that they do everything right, like running the correct license plate. It's not that freaking hard. But you guys are wondering, if you're wondering, well, what's your solution? Well, my solution is this. Attack the money. How do we attack the money? Police pensions. Anytime that an officer is found at fault, and it is documented, and it is videoed, that they should be penalized. In this case, for that family, the family that was literally traumatized, they should get mental health assistance and financial compensation. Where should that come from? The police pension fund. But Will, that means that affects all officers. Exactly. You want something done? You attack the money. And if you attack that police pension fund, watch how quickly all the things that used to happen don't happen anymore. Why? Because officers cannot no longer take a hit to those retirement funds. And that's how you solve problems. At the same time, in America, you have to train longer. You train longer being a hairstylist, plumber, technician, electrician, or any other trade. You train longer to be certified in a trade than you do a police officer. And you know the funny thing about police officers? They're always hiring. And these days, they'll accept almost anybody. And that alone should tell you quite a lot. But we're going to go and move on, guys, to our feel-good segment. Usually have the Frack guy here. We usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes make use of faith in humanity. But hey, it's Wednesday, which is hump day. We'll hopefully get to Thursday as we're getting close to the weekend. We want to leave you guys out in some, feel-good vibrations. And this one is surrounding the SAG strike. If you've been under a rock, guys, you know that actors and writers are basically on strike from Hollywood. And right now, it's still going on, although the last word of it is that they're back to the negotiating table. So at least all good signs. At the same time, guys, there are actors and writers who are struggling out there, whether it's the rent, utilities, or even food. And in this case, a food bank on Venice Boulevard is actually standing with striking actors and writers by feeding them for free. The group of the actual grocery store right here, affectionately known by a guy named as Uncle Glenn Corrado, is providing a cart of groceries worth $300 to every SAG-AFTRA or Writers Guild of America. As long as you present a card, you actually get free groceries for as long as the strike is going on. No questions asked. And actually, that's the man right there that's actually assisting with that. And I thought that was a cool thing because, again, to cover this really quickly, guys, Writers Guild of America is like the essential workers that everybody was praising. But writers, when it comes to Hollywood, don't really get a lot. They get base pay. They don't get dividends, incentives from streaming or DVD purchase, things of that nature. Actors along the same way. So it's nice to actually see people stepping in and actually making sure people at least are fed. That's the one thing I always say. If you can't do anything for anybody, at least you can feed them. So again, shout out to that man at World Harvest in Los Angeles. Again, if you have a SAG-AFTRA card or a WGA card, you basically can get free groceries. And in that opinion, that, my friends, is very cool. But that being said, guys, we are going to go ahead and really get to the end of this, guys. First and foremost, I do want to thank you all who watched, who liked, who shared, let people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here, guys. Shout out to my friend Vaughn at BigVZA on all social media. You can definitely check out his YouTube page. It has free beats. He will not ban you. And also, if you are interested in actually purchasing beats from him, definitely check him out, BigVZA on all social media. As for me, guys, you can find me BlackFox447 on all socials. I usually do reviews and everything that I read, that I write, play, things of that nature, and try to get my honest reviews on things. I'm not much of a critic, but I think I got a good eye handle on some things. Also, link at the bottom, guys. Let me make that just a wee bit bigger for you guys to see. If you actually will copy and paste that link into your browser, it will take you to my link tree that's the YouTube and Facebook groups for all my podcasts, How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, and of course, the Off on This podcast. Definitely like, share, and subscribe. And again, let me know what you think of everything we talked about. I want to keep the conversation going, but above all else, keep it clean. Again, we are here to inform and to share ideas. We're not trying to beat anybody down. But again, if you ask for the smoke, you're going to get hit with facts, not insults. Just saying. That also being said, guys, again, I cannot stress this enough. If you know someone that is doing something different, I mean, we all hit that point in our lives where we got to do something different, whether it's starting a business, a podcast, a show, anything of that nature. If you know somebody's trying to do something different, just share it. And you behind them, share it. I'm not talking monetary, although if you can donate, please donate. But sharing is free. Support them the same way you would support Beyonce if she knew you existed. That's all I'm saying. Aside from that, guys, it's really about taking care of each other as we are. Thankfully, we're still in summer. I can't wait for fall and winter. I can't wait for the cold days to come back because, woo, these $90 to $100 degree days is something else, especially if you got long hair. But with that being said, guys, as we do wrap up How the Frack Got Here, we basically, again, we have a mission of trying to keep you informed. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to break any rules. We simply want to give you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but we do want to provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do better as society as we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first Black woman Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black woman as the National Cybersecurity Director. And if Tommy Tuberville ever holds out, we actually might see our first 4 Black Star Military General of the Air Force. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go by our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we will all get through this. Peace.